Hi everyone, good morning. Thank you for joining us at this webinar we organized at the Veblen Institute. We are very happy to discuss this very important topic today as the energy crisis hits the world since the US-Israeli attack in Iran, and even if the Hormuz Strait reopens progressively since yesterday, international energy markets remain very unstable with high So yes, I was saying that the energy markets will remain very unstable with high price peaks probably, and last month the oil Brent stayed higher than $100 during several days, which is the a mark of a energy crisis, and the spot price of gas hit it more than 50 euros megawatt per megawatt hour, which is usually it's around 35. So we are living an energy crisis and it will last. So from the analyst's point of view, there's a price spikes could echo the 2022 energy crisis when Russia's invade Ukraine. And we insist on the fact that EU especially is better prepared than in the past energy crisis, but uncertainty remains high due to unpredictable duration of the conflict. And officials also warn that the EU's financial maneuvering room is more limited than before, especially because defense spending has increased. And it's the fact also for the rest of the world. And International Energy Agency Chief Fatih Birol also warned about an energy crisis more severe than in the 70s. So we need to be prepared. In the previous crisis, we've seen very fragmented national responses, which make at the European level at least the Commission is pushing for more EU-level coordination and financed response to the crisis through existing tools, such as carbon market revenues or windfall taxes rather than new borrowing. And that's precisely those windfall taxes that we want to put under the spot today, in particular, those regarding multinational firms in extractive sectors. Those kind of taxes, we've seen that before, especially in 2023, following the 2022 crisis. And this kind of taxes is very tempting for several reasons. First, economically, if higher prices do not reflect higher costs of production, energy crisis creates rents. That even from a very classical economic point of view, it's very legitimate to tax. Because it won't interfere with the stability of the firm. The question here might be that as critical infrastructures have been partially destroyed or totally destroyed, and that we don't know much about the production costs and how they are affected by the crisis, it's under question, and it had been a blind spot on previous experience in France. The second reason why it's very tempting, especially for some governments, it's because it's quite popular. Those big multinational firms are under the spot and then might be seen as war profiteers. So there is an economical window and there is a political window at that moment for this. We start having for this crisis some estimation of today's windfall profits that we will discuss today as well. But several tensions are at stake, as past experience show that details matter very much in the design of such taxes, and that there are several mechanisms that can interfere with the efficiency of such taxes. So today is a moment to bring together cutting-edge research and frontline advocacy around this very important policy debate, especially because the receipts of this tax could be very useful first to draw some response to the crisis today, but also to advance the ecological transition and the reduction of our dependence to fossil fuels. So we will explore today with Nino Moro Kessler, who is research fellow at the International Tax Observatory. Hey, so you've published this week a policy brief based on a working paper you've published a few months ago, and you will tell more about how extractive multinational enterprises allocate windfall profits and how government can design smarter and faster responses for that. We also welcome Bastien Gabel, who is
Hello.
policy officer at Transport and Environment, and he's here with me. You've published a tracker of super profits and windfall profits in the oil sector, so we will discuss that quickly. And I'm very sorry, Gregor Semyanyuk, he's super sick and he couldn't join us today. He's associate professor in the School of Public Policy and Department of Economics at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. But if you get a chance to read his paper about the windfall profits in the US after the 2022 crisis, and there is a wonderful paper in Le Grand Continent. It's in French, but you can translate it easily. And I'll try to give you some insights if we have time about this. So today is very an open discussion. We will present you those results, and the idea of this webinar is really to bring anything could be useful to the discussion and see if this is a good moment to tax one for profits, but also trying to organize ourselves as a researcher and a civil society organization as well. If you are elements to contribute to this debate, please feel free to add it to the chat, and we can give you a word as well. Maybe Nino, if you can explain us what happened in 2022 with this massive energy crisis and how multinational dealt with their super profits. The floor is yours.
Hi, thanks a lot for inviting me. Well, if we can go back to a bit in the past and see what happened. In 2022, following the start of the war in Ukraine, there were massive increase in gas prices, and as Madeleine was saying in her introduction, often when you have those very high price increase, production is quite fixed in this type of sector, so it stays the same in the short run, and this creates like very big profits for the firms that are extracting this type of product. What we saw in 2022 is this massive increase of profits, but we didn't really know how where those profits were located and how multinational allocated these windfall profits. And this is, if I can take a few minutes to explain a little bit what we did in our working paper with my co-author Alice Chioghetti. I'm going to share my screen. This is what we tried to understand in this new working paper from the International Tax Observatory. Can you see my screen?
Absolutely.
Super. This is what we try to track actually in this new working paper with Alice Chioghetti. We try to understand really what's the allocation of those profits. So as I was saying, we started from this motivation that this sector of, so in this paper we study oil, gas, but also mining, generate very large economic rents that are super important for the country of extraction. It's often a big part of the fiscal revenues, but super important also for the country of consumption, for example, because of this high volatility of prices that can have like big impact on many economic actors like consumers or firms affected negatively by rising energy prices. And in this sector, production is really dominated by multinational companies. For example, 20% of oil is extracted by 15 firms that are headquartered in the US and Europe. And those multinational companies, they tend to have what we call an integrated value chain, meaning that they don't just extract the gas or the oil, but they often within the firm transform it, distribute it, and so on. And they tend to have also affiliates in other type of countries outside of resource-rich countries and the consuming and refining countries. They tend to have affiliates also in low-tax jurisdiction, which is kind of a regular pattern of this type of big economic actors, of multinational companies across all sectors, but we do observe it also in this particular sector of extraction. And so the effective way those extractive runs can be shared is going to really depend on the global activity of those firms and how they allocate their extractive and other profits. And this is really an open question. And before we did this study, we didn't really have a good overview of how those firms organize their activity. So our research questions were really like first descriptive, how is economic activity allocated along the geography of those very large economic actors, those extractive, so oil, gas, and mining multinational groups. And second question, when you have windfall profits because there is a price increase for the specific commodities, how is it allocated along this geography and how does it affect the tax base and the fiscal windfalls that then states can get? So what we did in this study is that we were kind of the first one to try to map basically the activity of the big multinational groups in the extractive sector. And we do that with new data sources. We have on the one side new data on firms' financial activity from their global activity reports, what are called the country by country reports. And this allows us to track 77 multinational groups that covers 30% of world mining production made by multinationals and 37% of oil and gas production made by multinationals from 2016 to 23. And this data is also quite interesting because it allows us to both cover like very important tax havens for the extractive sector, such as Switzerland, but also like observe well what's happening in extraction countries. We combine this with new information that we have on the real extractive activity, and this allows us also to really observe, okay, those multinationals, they do extraction in this country, in this other country where we see that they are active, they are not doing extraction, but rather other activities, and to determine kind of this geography. And as well to know what those firms are really extracting. So that's the first part of our methodology. And second, we try to determine when you have increases in prices and windfall profits, how is it allocated then within this structure? So what we do is that we study when there is a price increase that is kind of specific to the multinational, because this multinational is specialized in oil extraction, for example. There is a specific change to the oil market. This generates windfall profits. How is it allocated within the firm? And we study this along this internal value chain. So what is happening where there is extraction, where there is midstream activity, but also across different types of countries, so low tax and high tax countries. So first, what is indeed the geography of those extractive multinationals? On this graph, I'm showing you what we find in the paper. So we are able, as I was saying, to say whether the activity is extractive in other countries or in tax havens. And here I'm just showing you the total economic activity of the sector of those 77 multinationals. Where is it taking place? Well, what we see is that the majority of the profit of those multinationals is made where they have an extractive activity. So where we observe that in those countries, they have also a mine or an oil and gas field. So it's 76% of profit that are booked in those type of countries. But there is a substantial activity also in other type of countries. So we see that if we take total profit of the sector, 13% of those profits are booked in tax havens. And if we take an average across firms, it's quite similar, it's 12%. But there is also important signs of real activity in other countries where the multinational doesn't extract and that are not tax havens. So those are the countries that are in blue on this graph. So you see that in this type of countries, we have 36% of employees and 24% of sales to other economic agents that are made. So sizable economic activity still in those countries. In tax havens, where we have a lot of profits and there are not fewer employees and tangible assets, so signs of economic activity than in the rest of the world. What are those firms doing? Well, with this new data, we are able to tell a few things about that. We see that in tax havens, those multinationals, of course, are not doing extraction, but they are more specializing in some specific type of services. So they do insurance for the rest of the group. They have intra-group finance services, also shareholding activity, and so on. While production, this bar here is more concentrated in extractive and other countries. Now, if we look at a bit more at, we contrast profit made and taxes paid for those multinationals. What's interesting is that we see that in extractive countries where oil, gas, and minerals are extracted, you have both high profitability if we compare it to the number of employees, for example, that the firm has. So for each employee the firm has in this type of countries, it's making quite important profits because this extractive activity is generating large rents that are shared with the extractive countries because we see also that in those extractive countries, those multinationals tend to pay higher taxes than in the rest of the world. It's around 33%. If we compare that to tax havens, actually, we do observe also very high profitability per employee, even higher than where the firms are making or extracting the product. And there, by contrast, we see that taxes are very low compared to the profit declared. So on average, the firms in tax havens, they pay 6% on the profit that are declared there. And then the other countries where we would have more like refining or distribution activity, the blue dots here are more in between, in the middle. So you don't see like huge profitability, but you see effective tax rates that are around 20%. So this is a bit like to describe you what those firms are doing in these different type of countries. And next, we look at what happened. Yes.
Maybe there is a clarification question
Yes.
from Max in the chat about the specificity of fossil fuel sector.
Of fossil fuel sector compared to mining.
Yes,
Oh.
are you able to?
Yeah. So I don't have the graphs sector by sector. but what I can tell you is that for fossil fuel, we do see also a lot of internal like refining and distribution activity. And you have a similar pattern of high tax rate in extractive countries. And actually, in this data, we are only able to observe income taxes, but you have also even other type of taxes in this sector that can be like, for example, a production sharing agreement. So the share of the extractive government could be even higher in this sector.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if and yeah, let me know if you have any other clarification question. What I can tell you is that the fossil fuel sector is around at least half of our sample, so it's quite representative of this.
Thank you.
And in this, as I was saying, in the second part of the study, we look at what happens when you have a price increase in the commodity in which the firm is specialized, and what happens then to the allocation of those windfall profits. The first thing we document, and this is not surprising, this is a kind of mechanical, is that when you see that you have an M&E that is specialized in oil, for example, and yet there is an increase in the price of oil from one year to another. We do see that when price increases, we observe at the same time an increase of total group profit. And what we see is that this increase in total group profits tends to be driven by the large extractive affiliates of the group. However, when we look at the rest of the group, we find that there is a disproportional allocation of windfalls, those windfall profits, to tax havens. So what we do is that we compare affiliates that are in tax havens to affiliates that are those blue part of the graph that are not doing extractive activity and are not in tax havens, to have kind of a benchmark of how windfalls would flow through the group. And what we find is that those tax haven affiliates, they book more profits in times of price increase than this rest of the group that is not doing extraction. And this is driven, we find, by the affiliates that specialize in intragroup finance. We do see also an increase in the selling activity of those firms and patterns that are consistent with profit shifting. And we quantify this disproportionate allocation of windfall profits in times of price increase. And what we find is that for $1 of increase in total group profits, we have 20 cents that go to tax haven affiliates. So you see that here there is a difference between the 12 cents on average and the 20 that go to tax havens, the first graph I was showing you, and the 20 cents that go to tax haven affiliates in times of price increase. And we do see also that the share of tax haven in total profit increases when the price of the commodity extracted by the firm also increases. We have also other results in the study. We find that asymmetrically, those firms are making big losses also because they faced very high volatility of economic conditions. But those big losses, they tend to be booked more in extractive countries rather than tax havens. We don't find large windfalls to midstream and downstream activities, so refining and other activities that the firm might be doing internally. And we don't find also that those windfalls are driven by headquarter countries and so on. Now, we can talk a bit more about the fiscal implication of those results if you want, because of course this is going to impact how much both extractive and consumption countries can tax off those windfall profits.
Yes,
So
thank you for that. And there are a few questions in the chat. Maybe we can take 5 minutes to discuss those before discussing the best way to integrate those results in our activities. So Christian had a question. When looking at the distribution of activities in tax havens, we see, for example, that much of insurance is done in tax havens. Is it for tax purpose or for other reasons? Do you know that? And there is another question in the Q&R about the availability of data for researchers.
yes. Yeah, very research-oriented question. I'll take this one first. It's a private database that is available with a license for researchers. Yeah. And quite used in the economic scientific literature for this type of work. To answer Christian's point, we don't document a particular mechanism for now in this study. What we do see is that the affiliates that are doing insurance that are in these tax haven countries tend to display lower effective tax rates than the rest of the group. So this would point into like tax incentives provided by those countries. But it could be also interesting for the firm to allocate some part of the risk it faces to those countries. This is something that is documented more generally by the other research work in economics, showing that allocating volatile or risky activity in terms of economic return to tax havens allows the firm also to justify justify high return also on this activity in this type of territory. So there is also maybe a question of risk allocation for the firm.
Yes, and then the 2022 aftermath of this very special tax that the EU decided and that each member country applied more or less. There were at least for the French case I'm sorry for this bias, but I know better. There were the fiscal tax were have been sorry for this, but so we expected billions of euro of return of this tax, and it actually was very disappointing, around 60 million. And one of the reasons of this was that the multinational firms inputted their previous losses from past years into the tax with this justification that they are taking risk and it's just remuneration of that. And it's not exactly the same as profit shifting, but it was a supplementary cause of this very disappointing result. And I think it's a nice way we need to address that as well, to make sure that another tax would be robust to this. And maybe talking about today, Bastien, could you present us maybe what you're having?
Yes.
See, because we were talking about 2022 and the amounts were huge, but we reacted a posteriori, and it was one of the big topic as well is to identify the super profits, as you said. There are different ways to put it and different economic justification as well, and that the firms will play with that with a very high level of precision. But today we are trying to track them day to day.
Should I rejoin the meeting? Try to rejoin the meeting and share the slide. So one moment, please.
And so the interesting thing today as well is that we are specifically talking about oil in this super tracker that you have. But we still have in mind with your research, that other extractive products and commodities are really at stake, especially gas, that we won't treat directly in this tracker, but that is very important. Another source of super profits, and you stated quickly, is those speculative activities and intra-group finance thing that is also a blind spot of taxation, but we can discuss that later. And I leave you the floor, Bastien, to present us your tracker.
Thanks, Madeleine, for the invitation. So I'm Bastien from Transport and Environment. Maybe I can begin this presentation of TNE's Windfall Profits Tracker that has been released a few days ago by presenting very briefly my organization. So Transport and Environment, shortly said TNE, is one of the leading organizations on clean transport and energy in Europe. It's an NGO. The headquarters of the NGO are in Brussels. We are very Europe-oriented, but we also have national offices in 6 countries, including France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and Poland across Europe. And maybe the two specificities that we can say about transport and environment is first the very data-driven work that transport and environment is doing. We have large in-house analysis capacities. And second, also the influence transport and environment has on policy making, the very good relation we have at European and national levels with policymakers. And of course, this is important to understand why we wanted to develop this tracker. So the basic idea is that we have now, with the beginning of this crisis, a political window of opportunity to bring this topic of taxation of oil companies' windfall profits into the public debate, to discuss how we could tax them the best way, and maybe do it in a faster way than in 2022. We see that politically there is already some movement, because we have this letter that has been sent to the European Commission by 5 EU countries that call for windfall tax on energy companies. And so with this tracker, you'll see it's a very basic methodology, but the goal is really to build on this political momentum to bring the topic on the table, and then bring the whole ecosystem to talk about how we could best tax those windfall profits. So as I said, the goal of the tracker is just to give an order of magnitude of the windfall profits that could be taxed at European level. So how is our tracker designed? First, you can see a very basic evolution of the EU fuel prices at the pump between 2022 and 2026. We can see that there is clearly a parallel between the situation in 2026 and in 2022, with high prices of diesel, both diesel and petrol. So the scope of this tracker is only road fuels, and specifically diesel and petrol, because it's what TNE is working on and has expertise. But of course, there may also be windfall profits on other types of fuels, for example, fuels for aviation, fuels for maritime sectors, and this is not in the scope of our tracker. So what is our tracker showing on the right side of the slide? Both for diesel and petrol, trying to break down the difference between the post-war prices at the pump and the pre-war prices at the pump, trying to understand how this different prices break down between upstream, meaning extraction of petrol, basically, and downstream, meaning refueling and distribution. And then, of course, the increase in taxes, that is quite a kind of mechanical increase because of the VAT. So yeah, it's a very, very basic tracker. You can see that you can select either the average since the outbreak or look at the specific increase week after week, beginning in the week of the 9th of March. Maybe some words about the methodology, how we ended up with these results. So very basic methodology. We look at two variables, the Brent prices each week and the prices at the pump. We compare for each variable the post-crisis and pre-crisis levels. And then we say that the excess revenues for the upstream and is the difference between the Brent price after and before the crisis. And for the downstream, the excess revenues are the prices at the pump after the crisis minus the prices at the pump before the crisis. And of course, we exclude the variation in taxes that we saw in the previous slide. Then the big question is, can we easily translate these excess revenues in excess profits? I can rephrase it by saying, are the costs for the upstream and for the downstream increasing, justifying these excess revenues, or is it just excess profits, windfall profits that these companies make? So for the upstream, Nino mentioned it, but we know that the costs of extraction of oil are largely fixed in the short term. So we can very easily make the hypothesis that excess revenues are excess profits. For the downstream sector is sometimes a bit more tricky because, for example, refining is gas powered, at least for around 10% of the power used in those facilities. So with the increase of price in gas, there may be an increase in costs for the downstream sector. But we looked at the data for the 2022 crisis, where the gas prices were much higher than today, and we saw that this increase was a slight increase in costs. So we also decided to neglect the increase in costs. So that's a big hypothesis, we know it. But the goal was to have a kind of order of magnitude, as I was mentioning, without having to buy or to dig into a very complicated data. So the whole hypothesis of this methodology is that both for upstream and downstream, excess revenues are excess profits. And then the big figure we are trying to put forward is the total windfall profits that we could tax. And so very basically, we take the daily windfall profits using the methodology I just described. We multiply it by the fuel consumption, taking average 2025 data, and then we multiply it by the days since the beginning of the war. And so we have these two results for upstream and downstream. So for upstream, since the beginning of the war, we have more than 4 billion euros in Europe that can be framed as excess profits. And then for the downstream, it's more than 2.2 billion euros across Europe. And then the second data that we show is very policy-oriented data, of course, extrapolation of this first estimation since the outbreak. If the price of the barrel were to stay at around $100 by the end of 2026, then we would have around 50 billion euros of upstream excess profits and 28 billion euros of downstream excess profits. So those are the main two figures of our study, of our tracker, I would say. So the tracker is updated week after week, of course. Some limitations of the study, I'll just talk about two of them.
Go quickly.
Yeah, just going quickly if you want to dive in some of them. Of course, as I mentioned, the scope is road fuels only, so there may be excess profits in other sectors. Talking about factors causing the tracker to overestimate the EU taxable share of excess profits, it's of course the biggest one is profit shifting by integrated companies, as we just discussed with Nino. So if you have more questions on these limitations, I would be more than happy to take them. Then in terms of next step, so we see on the right side of the slide what actually you were mentioning, Madeleine, is that following the 2022 EU windfall profit tax that was designed at EU level. There were different implementation by member states and very different results. For example, France, it was very disappointing, but some countries like Netherlands or Poland really managed to tax a lot of these profits. So there are really big questions around the mechanism that we want to put in place to tax those windfall profits. So for TNE, the two focus will be first at the European scale, that will be coordinated by our Brussels office, which will be a European campaign building on the tracker we designed to establish a European framework for taxing windfall profits as was made in 2022. And then we also want to be active at the national levels, and especially in France, where I will try to lead a national campaign to raise this issue in the public debate with other organizations, maybe NGOs. We will have most probably in the next few days, a tracker that will be designed specifically for France, because the results we have are at the European level. We want to know, especially specifically at the French level, what could be taxed and how the breakdown is between downstream and upstream, as we did for the European level. And then second very important thing, we want to coordinate as Transport and Environment in France with the academics to discuss on designing an appropriate tax mechanism. Of course, it's not the heart of our knowledge, but happy to be part of the discussions on this point. Back to you, Madeleine.
Thank you very much. I'll try to wrap all of this very quickly to open the floor to the discussion. So we've seen that there is something to tax here. Thank you, Vincent, for this. But we also see the complications of such a tax. The first one is profit shifting. The second one is a tax design that would be robust to different aspects, especially robust to these losses that are included most of the time, and a tax that is also robust to legal tax, as the last time Clash engaged a legal case against the EU. So maybe two questions very quickly. Maybe to you, Nino, and it's a bit the same in the chat. Should this tax be international to avoid profit shifting optimization? Should it be permanent? Should we always have this kind of mechanism so we are very reactive and a well-designed mechanism?
So yeah, super relevant question. To go back again on a bit on the 2022 case, the issue there was that the tax base, of course, in this case was designed to be national. So this makes it vulnerable to those patterns of profit shifting, those problems of profit shifting. So the idea going forward and designing a new modern windfall tax would be to have one that takes into account the profits made at the firm level, and to be robust to these patterns of profit shifting. So in a new policy brief that Madeleine mentioned in the introduction that we released with colleagues from the International Observatory, Tax Observatory, we actually proposed some solutions. So building on the conclusion of our research study, we proposed some solution that could be robust actually to that. So the idea would be to find a tax base that cannot be manipulated. So one could think, for example, about the global excess profits or windfall profits that are made at the firm level. And then there could be an apportionment, so you distribute taxing rights according to the real activity of a firm in the country wishing to tax those windfalls. Now, this type of instrument doesn't need to be put in place by a coalition of countries. It would be maybe quite interesting to have several countries wishing to implement such an instrument. But what is important is that we say that we describe that the fact that it could also be implemented in a very unilateral manner by only one country, wishing to as long as this country has the administrative capacity to first measure the global profit of the firm and then apportion the real economic activity of the firm in its own economy. So one could think that France could be taxing, for example, the excess profit of oil companies proportionally to the number of consumers or the sales that are made in France, for example. But we can think also of other tax base that could be robust to this type of problems. And then on the second point about having a permanent mechanism, I think it would make indeed easier, like reacting to this type of geopolitical shock that are multiplying those past years easier. So indeed, this is a super relevant and open question.
Okay, let's see the other question and answers. Tax windfall profits, redistribute them to the population is a good idea, but we'll need to wait next year to implement it. It's true that there is always this even how to help people now. Are there any ways to draw on these profits or we really need to have those consolidated data on firms now before? Or do you have other ideas to help people right now? Maybe without punishing more profits. And we have also Marcus at Eurodad arguing that to incentivize capital reallocation away from fossil fuels, we need a permanent surtax on all global profits. So that's where what we are discussing. Do you have insights on that, on a permanent surtax? Is it a good idea? Is it feasible?
Maybe I can take the first question. On how could we help people now, or how could we practically implement this tax quickly? First, maybe at the national level, I think if we have the data and we have a kind of idea of a national mechanism that we want to implement quickly, there is always the opportunity of an amended budget law at the middle of the year. So we could definitely advocate for that if we have a precise idea of what we want to push in the context. And then I think we can think of measures of quick electrification measures so that people can shift away from their fossil fuel dependencies. It can be, for example, by implementing quick bus lines in the countryside, sorry. On the roads that are most frequented to implement these lines could help people to not take their car, for example, once per week, and help them to avoid to be too much exposed to the high prices of petrol and fuel.
Okay, thank you. I had another question around this international tax basis that would be ideal. Is it feasible in the political context today? Is it feasible without the US as our multilateral institutions? And I mean the discussion on this international taxation framework at the OECD is quite hard today without with the USA. Living, and one of the important results that Gregor had, and he's not here to say so. I'm his voice. It was a huge part of a US-based company captured more than 200, 300 billions dollars in the last crisis. So, shall we? Can we have like a bunch of countries advancing together on this international basis? This international taxation, what's your feeling, about that?
So the idea that we have in the note is that we really want to propose solutions that could as well be implemented by a coalition of countries, but could also be implemented by only one country or a few European countries if they wanted to, actually, because those countries would leverage the fact that there are firms that are making big windfall profits that we can observe, we can measure. And those firms are actually having an access to the EU or French market because they have consumers there, they have like real activity there that we can also measure. And therefore, the country implementing a windfall tax would tax those windfall profits proportionally to this real activity and the consumers that are located in those countries. So that's really the idea of having a way of both having a tax base that is, and it's really important, comprehensive of all windfall profits and not just and takes into account the ones that are declared in low tax jurisdictions, but having a way of taxing them that is proportional to the activity that is undertaken in the taxing country.
Okay, thank you. I see, Marcus, that you have a lot to say on that, so we give you we open your mic if you want to talk.
This is very kind. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, all colleagues, for this timely webinar. This is so important that we bring up this debate. Indeed, there is a window of opportunity. I mean, what we are saying, when we look at environmental tax policy, in our view, it's not enough just to tax the windfall profits, but we have to get to the roots of it. Is they're making so much money even without the windfalls, and this we have to tackle. And this we would, by increasing the cost of capitals, ending in a permanent surtax on all global profits. At the same time, we have this UN tax convention moving on at the moment, and this as well opens an opportunity. They're saying we have to take into account environmental issues, and as well in the global scene, we know how to tax the global profits of the international, right? This is as well part of the OECD deal. So again, we want to in a way make one step further, right, and make this a real a catalyzer for the transition away from fossil fuels. And this is why, again, we are arguing you have all the instruments. You have done it once, and now do it again. Make this extra step, as well, Nino, and as the ITO paper says, if we really want to tackle it by the roots, we have to go after the global consolidated profits, and this is now where we have this opportunity at hand. So everybody is invited as well to get into the ring. European countries are not really the most progressive ones when it comes to negotiate the new global tax deal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcus. I definitely agree with that, and that's why we are also looking for the more robust way to do that. Christian also has an interesting question on the level of taxation of windfall profits and the design of such a tax. Should it be a flat tax or a progressive tax? Do you have insights on that?
Well,
the last one was a flat tax now.
Yeah, I think the last one was 33%, if I remember correctly. But there had been experiences in the past. Actually, Gabriel Zuckman was mentioning it like in the past days. In the 70s, I think some countries reach even tax rate of 80 or 70%. So it really depends. I guess the economists, like academic response would be that like, as long as profits are rent, it's not distortive to tax them. So then it becomes, I guess, a political choice of what level of taxation we want. And then on the progressive question, it's an interesting one, and there is actually we can also look at the example of what extractive states are doing, because they have a experience of dealing with extractive rents, and a lot of them tend to have fiscal instruments that become progressive with the global prices, for example, or things like that. So there exists some examples of progressive instruments.
Thank you. If you have 5 minutes, we can continue a bit the discussion, even if we said we stop at 11. Thank you for that. On other countries, I've noted also that the Philippines, Australia, even in the US, there is this proposition, this legal proposal. So there are other countries that could be interesting to discuss with. And there was this question from Johanan that about the difference between Poland and the Netherlands. Do you have insights of that? Or we should maybe read it. That's interesting.
We should dig in this.
We should dig in this, and we'll try to see our Polish friends if they have any ideas.
If I can say something on the case of the Netherlands, there is extraction in Netherlands, so maybe this explains a bit like the high level of windfall taxes. The UK also extract, and I think they got much more than France, for example. So it's also easier to tax where extraction.
That's something we've seen also in France, because there have been two taxes, one on extractive oil and gas, and one on electricity and the inframarginal rents of electricity. And because we produce it, and because we have a better knowledge of the value chains and of the different costs, the production cost, it was easier in a sense to tax them effectively. So probably having it in a, but it's a nice way to dig into that. Are there any other reactions, questions? As we said, the discussion is just starting, is open, and so we'll see how to exploit at best this political window that we talked. And now that we have so much knowledge about the aftermath of 2022, it will be very interesting to continue the discussion and to bring together the different pieces of knowledge and advocacy. So let's continue this. Thanks a lot for your participation. Thanks a lot for your contributions, Nino and Bastien.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And we'll see you soon to continue on this discussion. It's a very important topic. Don't hesitate to reach us at the Veblen Institute as well to have the documentation or to continue the discussion. The record will be available, and we will send you the replay. Thank you very much. Have a very nice day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.